Welcome back. Thanks for joining me again. It's time for us to talk about Just the Facts, ma'am. So, in this first episode of Just the Facts, we're going to go through what are clouds made of. So, we started off this section talking about traditional architectures and the challenges associated with the data centers that held the equipment related to those architectures. So, we essentially covered what did we have before there was a cloud. We talked about how power and cooling and space became an issue in many data centers. We talked about the support requirements associated with all of that equipment. So we took a look at both business and technical challenges related to traditional architectures. And then we talked about what is the cloud. And we boiled the cloud down to three basic types of services: infrastructure as a service. And this is where we're providing just the underlying infrastructure, the compute, the network, and the storage. We may or may not provide a hypervisor so that the virtual machines can be set up where you as the customer then have the ability to install operating systems, install applications, and present those applications to your end users. We talked about platform as a service. So with platform as a service, the virtual machines, all of the underlying hardware are all provided. So in that example, you basically would be providing the applications that you want to install. And then you have software as a service where everything is pre-installed and set up by the vendor. Applications like Dropbox or Office 365, these different type of applications that we talked about through this section, those are software presented as a service. And then we talked about there being three different types of clouds. AWS is a type of public cloud. You also have private clouds. So a private cloud would be something that's owned completely by a private organization and might be running inside of their personal data center or in what we call a co-located data center. A co-located data center is where an organization is just renting space and has their servers and equipment sitting in someone else's data center. And then we had hybrid cloud, where hybrid cloud allows you to have a cloud environment where you have your local resources and you have resources stored in the cloud. We went through some terminology. We talked about elasticity, scalability, and we talked about how scalability stretches. And when it stretches, we can scale and add additional resources. When it's elastic, not only does it stretch, but it snaps back. It can grow and shrink. Then you have high availability and fault tolerance, and they really do kind of go hand in hand, even though they're slightly different meanings. But the ultimate goal of high availability and fault tolerance is to give us the most uptime, or time where our servers are operating and functioning normally without any type of a failure. Then we talked about the AWS Global Infrastructure, 21 different regions at various locations around the world. And within those regions, we have availability zones. And remember, we had a minimum of 2 availability zones per region, sometimes more. So we looked at Northern Virginia and we saw that we had 6 availability zones in that particular region. And if you look over here, you can see that I'm logged into the AWS console, and here's my region, Northern Virginia. And again, we're going to look more at the AWS console in a later lesson. And within those availability zones, we could have one or more data centers in an availability zone. And then we went through, so that's what clouds are made of. We talked about compute, networking, and storage, and them being the 3 primary foundational components that make up almost any type of infrastructure. And there are other things that potentially could be part of an infrastructure as well. But at its core, those are the 3 things at a minimum that we need in order to create a working infrastructure. So that's going to do it for this episode of Just the Facts. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next lesson.